had patrolled the stretch of Route 7 that hugs the Camden, Maine harbor for nearly 2 decades, long enough to memorize every pothole, every stubborn seagull that refused to budge from the center line. That Tuesday at dusk felt like any other. Misty air, lobster boats ghosting back to the pier, until the battered teal hatchback in front of me flickered only one red eye when it braked at the marina intersection. Procedure demanded I initiate a stop. Habit had made the motion second nature. What I didn't expect was the woman who stepped out before I could finish announcing myself over the cruiser's radio. She was maybe 25 at most, freckled cheeks glowing beneath the sodium lamps, auburn curls tumbling from a loose bandana patterned with tiny anchors. Her denim jacket was plastered with enamel pins, queer flags, vintage band logos, a tiny cartoon coffee cup, each catching the light like confetti. Instead of waiting for me at her window, she leaned against the hatchback's bumper, palms out, grinning as if we were old friends meeting at the county fair. "Evening, officer," she called, voice lilting, musical. "Lieutenant," I corrected automatically as I approached, though the warmth in her tone knocked some of the starch from mine. "Your left tail light's out." I tried to keep it curt. She pressed a finger to the center of her chest in exaggerated horror. "Guilty as charged, Lieutenant. I swear it was working this morning. Can we plead temporary misbehavior and promise reform?" Her words spilled out like espresso over ice. Sweet, quick, impossible to ignore. I saw the faintest quiver at the corner of her mouth when our gazes locked, as though she sensed my sudden curiosity and dared me to follow it. "License and registration," I managed. She fished them from the glove box, papers fluttering. The scent of roasted beans drifted out, and I realized the entire back seat was packed with burlap coffee sacks. "Coffee run?" I asked despite myself. "Lucent Cafe's newest shipment," she said, tapping a sack lovingly. "I'm Harper Reyes, head barista, part-time mechanic of this jalopy, an aspiring good citizen, provided you give me a chance to fix that light tonight." Her confidence was disarming. I dealt with belligerent motorists, weeping teenagers, and slick lawyers, but never someone who treated a traffic stop like a spontaneous sidewalk chat. She watched me inspect the bulb housing, capable of a grin playing on her lips. "Tell you what," she said softly. "If I can swap in my spare bulb right here in under 5 minutes, maybe you'll consider letting me off with a warning? I can't afford another ticket, and Camden's finest might appreciate a lifetime supply of cappuccinos on the house." Bribery, technically, though offered with a wink bright enough to power the harbor lighthouse. I should have shut it down immediately, but curiosity tugged harder. "You've got 5 minutes, I heard myself say, handing back her documents. She squealed, dashed around to the trunk, and within moments had tools spread like surgeons' instruments on the curb. She chatted while she worked, how she'd moved north after art school in Providence, how the ocean tasted different here, how she painted seascapes on driftwood when the cafe was slow. Her sleeve slid back, revealing a delicate compass tattoo that inched toward her elbow each time she tightened a screw. I found myself timing her not on the chronometer but by the quickening of my own pulse. 4 minutes later the new bulb glowed steady crimson. She straightened, grease smudged on one cheek like war paint, and saluted me with the burnt-out bulb. "Mission accomplished, Lieutenant Blake." Hearing my last name in her mouth startled me. I hadn't offered it. She caught the flicker in my eyes. "Your name tag," she explained, tapping the insignia on my chest as if it were a private joke between us. Camden's evening fog pressed in, turning the streetlights to halos. For a suspended moment we stood inches apart, breath mingling in the damp air. Protocol screamed at me to issue the warning and retreat. Instead I cleared my throat. "Drive safe, Ms. Reyes. And, thank you for the offer but no bribes." She grinned. "No bribes, just gratitude. Stop by Lucent. First lattes on me." She climbed into her car, started the engine, and rolled down the window. "See you around, Lieutenant." The hatchback disappeared into the mist with both taillights shining, leaving the hum of my cruiser and the thud of my heart as the only sounds on the road. I stared down at the citation pad in my hand, blank. For the first time in years, I'd let instinct override procedure. And for the first time in longer, I found myself hoping I'd run into a certain rule-bending barista again. As I slipped back into the driver's seat, dispatch crackled, asking for my status. I answered on autopilot, eyes still tracing the path Harper had taken. Something had shifted in those 5 minutes. Something I wasn't yet ready to name, but couldn't ignore. The night felt warmer, the harbor lights brighter, and the day's routine patrol suddenly seemed like the opening line of a story I hadn't realized I was eager to tell. The next morning, my alarm chimed at 5:30, long before sunlight could bother creeping over the harbor. After 22 years in uniform, my body usually rose before the clock, but today I lay there blinking at the ceiling fan, replaying Harper Reyes's grin like a projector on the plaster. Ridiculous, I scolded myself. I was 46, 1 year from pension review, and I'd let a stranger's playful bravado jam my thoughts like beach sand in a gearshift. I showered, tugged my dark blue shirt into a regulation tuck, and pinned the silver badge above my heart. The metal felt heavier than usual, as though it sensed how restless that heart was. When I clipped on the radio, dispatch buzzed with the overnight blotter. Noise complaints, a loose fishing trawler, a raccoon stuck in a bait shop, but my mind kept drifting to the name Lucent Cafe. By 8 o'clock I'd convinced myself a patrol lieutenant could stop for coffee without compromising the force. Camden's streets were still quiet. Early tourists hunched in windbreakers as gulls wheeled overhead. Lucent Cafe occupied a renovated boathouse at the edge of the marina. Cedar shingles, string lights, and a painted sign of a lighthouse casting a beam shaped like a steaming mug. Inside, jazz drifted from an old record player, mingling with bursts of milk steamer hiss. Harper stood behind the oak counter, sleeves rolled to her elbows, tamping espresso with practiced rhythm. When she saw me, her eyebrows arched in theatrical triumph. "Lieutenant Blake returns," she announced, loud enough for 2 retirees at the window to glance over their newspapers. Before I could reply, she slid a ceramic cup across the counter. A heart of latte foam floated in the center, artful and steady. "I promised your first one was on me," she said, softening her voice. "No bribes, just gratitude, remember?" I lifted the cup, inhaling cedar-roasted beans and caramel notes. "I'm technically on duty," I warned. "One sip won't turn me rogue," she teased. "Besides, it's decaf until noon. House rule." I couldn't help a laugh. Decaf. In a harbor town fueled by fishermen's full-octane brew, it seemed absurdly wholesome. While I tasted, smooth, nutty, perfect, Harper wiped her hands on a linen towel and leaned on the counter like she had all the time in the world. "So," she said, "does Lieutenant Blake have a first name, or is that classified?" I hesitated. In uniform, first names felt like unlocked doors. Yet something about her, her candor, the mischievous tilt of her head, made caution feel like cowardice. "Eleanor," I said at last. "Friends call me Nora." She repeated it, savoring the syllables. "Nora," she echoed, and my heart did a small, embarrassed stutter. "Nice to meet you properly." I scanned the cafe. Reclaimed wood tables, chalkboard specials, watercolor seascapes. Her own, I guessed, hung along brick walls. A seascape near the register caught my eye. Moonlight refracting on black-blue water, painted in loose strokes that somehow glowed. Beneath it, the signature read HR. "You paint." I nodded toward the artwork. Harper's cheeks flushed a shade deeper than the latte art. "Guilty again. Driftwood frames, too. Cliché coastal artist, I know." "Not cliché," I said, surprised by my sincerity. "Honest." A timer dinged in the back room. Harper straightened. "Roast's done. Give me 2 minutes." She disappeared through swinging doors, leaving me holding the last swallow of latte and an inexplicable warmth in my chest. 2 minutes stretched to 5, then 10. Customers filtered in and out. When Harper hadn't returned, the barback, a lanky college kid named Mason, peeked through the kitchen door and frowned. Something tugged in my gut. I slipped behind the counter with the ease of long authority and followed the scent of beans and burnt sugar. The storage room was dim, lit only by a single bulb. Harper was kneeling beside an open burlap sack, hands running through dark roasted beans, but her expression wasn't one of pride. It was uneasy. Scattered on the cement floor were shards of broken pottery and a small glass vial. A pungent metallic odor hovered in the air. "Everything okay?" Yes. Harper jerked her gaze up, eyes wide. "I think so," she said, voice tight. "One sack was slashed. Someone must have tampered with it last night. I also found this." She held up the vial, empty, save for a faint crystalline residue. My pulse quickened. "You recognize it?" She shook her head. "But the beans smell off. Chemical." I crouched beside her, careful not to contaminate anything. Years on the force had sharpened my sense for illicit substances trafficking through seemingly innocent channels. "We'll bag this for evidence," I said, sliding on gloves from my belt kit. "Have you noticed anyone suspicious hanging around?" Harper swallowed. "There's a supplier who keeps pressuring us to drop our fair trade distributor. He got aggressive last month when I refused." I logged the name, took photographs, sealed the vial. Harper watched, arms folded tightly. The playful confidence she'd worn like a banner last night shrank into something vulnerable. Without thinking, I reached out, resting a gloved hand on her shoulder. "We'll handle this," I assured. "You did the right thing calling it out." Her eyes flicked to mine, hazel flecked with gold, and for a second the storage room's humming refrigerator faded. "Thank you, Nora," she murmured. The sound of my name in her voice steadied something deep inside me. The rest of the shift blurred into paperwork, phone calls to the state lab, and a statement from Harper. Every time our eyes met over the forms, an unspoken thread tightened. By late afternoon, with evidence logged and crime scene tape sealing the storeroom door, I prepared to leave. Harper walked me to the cruiser, hands tucked in her jacket against the brisk ocean wind. "I owe you more than coffee," she said. "You kept me calm." I adjusted my hat, unsure what to do with the sudden tenderness I felt. "Part of the job." He smirked. "Come on, Lieutenant, you could have sent a rookie. You stayed." I opened the cruiser door, then paused. "I wanted to be sure you were safe." The honesty tasted terrifying and euphoric all at once. Harper's cheeks dimpled. "Then let me return the favor. Lucent hosts open mic every Friday. Music, art, terrible poetry. It's corny, but it makes people smile. Come off duty, grab a tea, sit in the back. I'll read one of my short stories, so you can critique my performance." It felt like a date, though neither of us said the word. Regulations frowned on fraternization while in uniform, but Friday was my day off. I weighed a lifetime of caution against a night of possibility. The scales tipped. "I'll be there," I said. She stepped backward toward the cafe, walking in reverse so she could keep her eyes on me. "Then Friday, 8 o'clock, no badge, no citations, deal?" "Deal." My drive to headquarters traced the coastline, gulls swooping low over gray waves. I should have been running scenarios about chemical tampering, stakeouts, warrants. Instead, I was picturing string lights, Harper's animated hands describing fictional worlds, and the moment the lights might dim low enough that rank in years and fear slipped away. That evening I filed the incident report under potential narcotics contamination. Before locking my office, I stared at the blank signature line a long time, then signed Eleanor Blake in neat block letters instead of my usual cursive scrawl. It felt like staking a small flag in fresh territory, daring future me to keep stepping forward. I drove home through twilight, windows cracked so salty air filled the car. Every intersection's green light felt slightly magical, as though Camden itself were ushering me on. By the time I reached the solitary clapboard house perched above the harbor, the horizon burned rose gold. I cut the engine, and in the hush after the key turned, an unfamiliar excitement bloomed. Friday was only 3 days away. 3 days of duty rosters and evidence logs and maybe a visit to Lucent to check security. I'd lie if asked, but Harper would know. 3 days until I sat in a circle of mismatched chairs, listening to her voice file the edges off my guarded world. I climbed the porch steps, badge glinting in the dying sun. With each footfall, I felt less like a veteran officer closing another routine day, and more like someone stepping onto an unmarked road where the street signs hadn't been posted yet. And for once, I didn't mind not knowing the speed limit. Friday came on a salt-sharp wind, the kind that flapped flags on the harbor masts and rattled the gulls' cries into broken whistles. I spent the day finishing the chain of custody paperwork, fielding terse calls from the state lab. They'd confirmed trace fentanyl in the cracked vial, and coordinating with Detective Morgan about possible trafficking routes through local wholesalers. My badge felt heavier than usual in its desk drawer when I locked it away at 5:30. Off-duty meant nothing official between me and Harper tonight. I changed into an indigo cable-knit sweater and dark jeans, civilian enough I hoped, then walked the half-mile from my house to Lucent Cafe. The marina's string lights shuddered in the breeze, mirroring an impatience fluttering in my chest. Through the boathouse windows I could already see people clustered at mismatched tables. Teenagers with notebooks, retirees clutching travel mugs, a pair of middle-aged buskers tuning guitars. On stage, just a low riser made of old pallets, stood Harper, coaxing a mic stand into place, curls caught inside the glow of hanging Edison bulbs. She spotted me instantly, grin blooming like the tide pulling across sand. She raised 2 fingers in a quiet salute. I found a seat near the back, heart ricocheting like a moth around a porch lamp. Mason served chamomile tea in a mason jar, winking when he recognized me. "Save the world later, Lieutenant," he whispered. "Tonight's about stories." The open mic hostess warmed up the crowd. A poetry reading about cedar smoke, a nervous teen crooning over a ukulele, a grizzled lobsterman reciting limericks that made half the audience blush. Then Harper stepped to the microphone, a leather-bound journal trembling just enough in her hands to remind me she wasn't fearless, only brave. "Good evening, friends," she began, voice carrying that same espresso-sweet lilt that had hooked me on Route 7. "I wrote this piece after a recent, unexpected encounter." She dared a glance my way. Electricity skated down my spine. "It's called Tail Light Epiphanies." Her story wasn't literal. No police cruisers, no traffic citations, but I heard us in the metaphors. A lighthouse keeper stuck in an endless rotation of duty, blinded by routine, and a wandering painter who repaired the beacon's shattered lens with shards of sea glass. The keeper's first glimpse of color refracted through that new lens knocked her breathless. She suddenly saw her entire coastline anew. More dangerous, more beautiful, and for the first time worth exploring beyond the breakwater. Harper's words wrapped the room in hush so thick, even the espresso machine seemed to hold its steam. When she closed the journal, tears glazed 2 pairs of eyes. Hers, and though I fought them, mine. Applause crashed like surf, and she stepped from the stage directly toward me, cheeks glowing. Before she could speak, the front door banged open. 3 men in heavy canvas jackets stalked in, rain still dripping from their cuffs. Camden was small enough that everyone felt the vibration shift. Conversation thinned to a nervous rustle. I recognized the tallest one, Victor Palano, the alternative supplier Harper had mentioned. His gaze rinsed across the cafe until it docked on Harper. A shark's smile. "Thought we'd grab a nightcap, Reyes," he said too loud. "Heard you've got a stash only special friends can taste." Harper stiffened. "We're closed for private event, Victor. You'll have to leave." He laughed, sliding one hand across the pastry case glass with a squeak that set my teeth on edge. "Private. Looks public to me. And I'm here about my property." Eros. My badge might have been at home, but a lifetime of command still lived in my posture. "Evening, gentlemen. The lady asked you to leave." Victor's eyes narrowed. "Look who's moonlighting. Lieutenant Eleanor Blake, right? Thought I smelled ironclad authority." He took a half-step closer, lowering his voice so only we could hear. "You stick to speeders and drunk kids, officer. Coffee distribution is above your pay grade." Behind him, one of his men idly rolled a burlap sack between his boots, the same kind that held the fentanyl-laced beans. Fear rippled through the cafe, silent but visible as wind across tall grass. Harper's fingers found mine beneath the table edge. She squeezed once, grounding me. Then she let go and stepped forward. "You want the sack," she said, steady but shaking at the edges. "Fine. It's taped and tagged in police evidence. You'll have to file a request like any law-abiding citizen." The quip trembled with bravado, and I felt a surge of pride and dread at once. Victor's smile wilted. "You're making dangerous friends," he hissed. In 3 strides he was beside her, looming. I moved to intercept, but he only brushed Harper's shoulder with 2 fingers, almost tender, which somehow felt more menacing than a shove. "Accidents happen to stubborn people," he murmured, then pivoted, whistling to his cronies. They withdrew like a tide sliding off black rock, door slamming behind them so hard the Edison bulbs jittered. Palms bracing the counter, Harper inhaled like she'd surfaced from cold water. I checked the shaken crowd. Mason already calmed patrons, offering free biscotti. Normalcy blinked back on like faulty stage lights. Still, I could feel the tension clinging to every wall beam. "Come with me," I said to Harper quietly. We ducked through the back hall, past the taped-off storeroom, and out a side door into the alley, where the damp smelled of kelp and spilled porter. Harbor fog blurred the street lamp halos. She hugged herself. Denim jacket no match for the chill adrenaline left behind. "That vial could have killed someone," she whispered. "He knows we called the police lab. He's not going to let it go." I wanted to pull her into my arms right there. Promise bulletproof endings. Instead I took a breath that tasted of rank seaweed and months-old bravado. "I've already looped in narcotics. We're linking Victor to interstate trafficking. But we'll need your official deposition. We may need you wired for a meetup." Harper stared, freckles fading under the alley light. "A sting. It's the safest way to nail him before he hurts someone." Pause. "But that kind of cooperation is voluntary. It's dangerous." Something fierce lit her eyes. Same spark I'd seen when she swapped a taillight in 4 minutes flat. "People drink my coffee. Kids, tourists, fishermen at dawn. If fentanyl ends up in their cups because I'm scared." She shook her head. "I'll testify. I'll wear your wire. Whatever it takes." Emotion surged, messy and sudden. I reached for her hand, fingers cold but steady. "You won't do it alone," I said, voice low. "I'll be outside, eyes on you the entire time." For a heartbeat, nothing existed but our joined hands and the hollow clatter of rigging from the dock. Then Harper leaned forward, no hesitation, and pressed her lips to mine. The kiss wasn't frantic. It was a measured promise, warm despite the wind, threaded with equal parts fear and faith. When she drew back, breath ghosting between us, I realized I'd closed my eyes the way one does when listening to waves in a conch shell. She smiled, a small, private curve of mouth meant only for me. "Guess the lighthouse keeper found a new coastline to chart," she said, voice trembling less than her hands. I laughed, a sound I hadn't heard from myself in too long, then brushed her cheek with my thumb. "And the painter better keep her compass handy. Waters get rough." We straightened simultaneously as cruiser lights flicked down the avenue. Back up I'd silently called the moment Victor walked in. Detective Morgan emerged, brow furrowed, glancing between us and the cafe. "Lieutenant, we got your text. Intel on Palano." "Inside," I said, professionalism dropping back over me like a Kevlar vest. I squeezed Harper's hand once more. "We'll set the plan in motion tomorrow." She nodded, stepping toward the cafe's glow. Before she slipped in, she looked over her shoulder. "Be careful on your way home, Nora." "I will," I said, but my eyes tracked the shadows where Victor had melted into the night. The harbor fog had thickened, swallowing the boardwalk and muffling the waves into a low, ominous hush. As detective vans arrived and officers fanned out, I felt the story tilting into its stormiest chapter yet. The line between duty and desire was now a taut wire stretched above dark water. Tomorrow I would climb onto it with Harper's life, and maybe my own heart, balanced in the sway. The ocean always sounds different at 3 a.m. From the command van parked behind the cannery warehouse, it was less a lullaby than a heartbeat. Steady, relentless, reminding me how few beats lay between Harper and whatever waited inside. I adjusted the earpiece again, pushing back the dread that every whisper of static might be her last breath. We'd chosen neutral ground, an abandoned packing floor Polano's crew sometimes used to offload special shipments before laundering them through legit cafes. 6 unmarked cars ringed the block, antennas tucked, engines idling. Detective Morgan was 2 seats behind me listening on the second channel, while state troopers staged on the service road. But the voice that filled the van belonged only to Harper Reyes, carried on a thread-thin wire sewn beneath the collar of her sea-green flannel. "Victor, you wanted to talk in private. Here I am," she said, tone light, just shy of taunting. I pictured the tilt of her chin, the anchor bandana tucked into her pocket like a secret flag. Polano's reply oozed through the feed. "Brave tonight, aren't we? Honor among baristas." A pause, footsteps echoing on concrete, then a softer, more dangerous rasp. "Show me your hands." Slow. My pulse slammed into my throat. If he spotted the transmitter button stitched near her cuff, we'd be out of time. I raised my hand, signaling Morgan to ready the breach team. Harper's voice steadied, smoother than my own breathing. "No tricks, Victor. You bring the beans with your additives, I bring the scale. We settle debts and you leave my suppliers alone." I'd coached the pitch, but the courage was all hers. A metallic clatter, Victor dropping a duffel on a work table. "You really think the cops care about fair trade labels?" he sneered. "They care about power." I leaned toward the monitor, studying thermal silhouettes on the screen. 5 bodies, Victor's men fanned in a half-moon. Harper stood dead center, slight, unarmed but for conviction. The riptide moment I dreaded yanked at the night. "Open it," Victor ordered. Zipper teeth rasp. Morgan mouthed fentanyl. I nodded. If the lab was right, that dust could kill on airborne contact. Harper knew it too. She was breathing shallow on purpose, a trick we'd practiced in my living room using flour and a paper mask. Polano whistled. "Beautiful, isn't it? Pure weight in a world of lightweights." Harper's next line cracked slightly, but she delivered it. All that poison for a quick buck. Must be exhausting. Something slammed Victor's fist, judging by the spike in the audio. "You think you're special because a bored cop took a shine to you? She can't protect you forever." Morgan's hand hovered over the green light that would trigger simultaneous entries. My own fingers curled into fists. Professionalism stretched thin as tied knife kelp. Then Harper said the one word we'd set as code for immediate breach. "Lighthouse." I hit transmit. "Go, go, go." Doors exploded inward like thunder. Shouts ricocheted, boots pounded. I was through the side door before backup could shout clearance. Adrenaline shredding protocol. Inside, sodium work lamps cast long shadows over conveyor belts and rusted hooks. Polano grabbed Harper's wrist, dragging her toward the office stairs. She twisted, stomping the arch of his boot. Another maneuver we'd drilled in my driveway. He swore, yanked a pistol from his coat. I didn't think. Training became instinct. Front sight squeeze. The impact round struck his shoulder, spinning him sideways. His gun clattered across concrete. Harper stumbled free, hair whipping across her eyes. By the time Morgan's team secured the others, Victor lay cuffed and howling about excessive force. Medics would later find the slug lodged neatly against his clavicle. Non-lethal, but it hurt enough to make him docile. As crime scene lights swept the dust motes, Harper crossed the gulf between us and folded into my arms, shaking so hard I felt her heartbeat through 2 layers of Kevlar. "Breathe with me," I whispered, matching her rhythm until the tremors ebbed. She tipped her forehead against mine. Even beneath warehouse fluorescence, her freckles looked sun-kissed, defiant. "I thought the tide might take you," I said into her curls. She offered a watery laugh. "Lighthouse keeper, remember? I follow the beam home." By dawn, Victor was booked on drug trafficking, attempted assault, and 6 federal counts. Harper's deposition ran 4 pages, every line neat despite the tremor that lingered in her pen grip. When the sun finally inched over the breakwater, painting lobster buoys pink and gold. I signed the last line of paperwork and steered her outside. Lucent Cafe sat dark across the marina, police tape still fluttering on the storeroom door. Yet the sky behind it blazed like a freshly pulled shot, amber heart, dark crema edges. Harper leaned on the boardwalk rail, wind teasing her curls. "Camden's going to wake up needing coffee in about an hour," she murmured. "Then we'd better fix your storeroom," I replied. But she shook her head, turning to me. "It can wait. There's something I want first." She reached into her jacket pocket and produced a tiny compass pendant. Silver, delicate, nothing like the bold tattoo on her arm. "Art school project," she said, cheeks tinting. "I made two, kept one, lost the other. Until highway fate handed me a lieutenant with a broken taillight ticket she never wrote." She pressed the pendant into my palm. "Take it. So you never patrol alone again." The gesture undid me. Years of armor, paperwork, protocol, cynicism, peeled away like old paint in sea air. I closed my fingers around the compass, then around her hand. "Only if you promise to keep the matching one," I said. "And to call me Nora outside business hours." She smiled and kissed me in the rising daylight, unhurried, nothing covert about it. The harbor remained indifferent. Gulls squawked, rigging clanged, a fisherman coughed somewhere on deck. But for those breaths, the world felt still as a shutter click. 2 weeks later, Lucent Cafe reopened with a new mural. A lighthouse sending watercolor beams over dark waves, driftwood frame carved by Harper's own hands. Underneath, in discreet script, it read, "For those who stand watch so others may dream." I still run Route 7, still note every pothole and seagull. And every time I pass the boathouse, a light blinks twice from inside. My cruiser's dashboard now bears a tiny silver compass on a length of twine, needle quivering toward whatever's next. The coastline hasn't changed, but I have learned its hidden coves, the laughter tucked in Harper's throat when I mispronounce an espresso roast, the steadiness in her gaze when we share night shifts over donuts instead of biscotti, the way her hand finds mine during open mic nights, anchoring me between duty and desire. And sometimes, when the fog folds in too thick and the harbor horn moans like a sorrowing old god, I feel the compass warm against my chest, reminding me of a broken taillight, an unwritten ticket, and a young woman whose charm did more than bend the rules. It rewrote them, charting a new course where two stubborn hearts now navigate by the same bright beam.